You are watching Maximus Aviation.
Greetings everybody, Maximus here. Well, I don't know why. Whenever I have Boeing news to report, it's always a good news, bad news situation. Yet here we are again. So as always, let's start with the good news and then, of course, get to the bad. Boeing Commercial Airplanes CEO Stephanie Pope recently announced a significant milestone towards Boeing's recovery as mechanics in Everett, Washington have officially completed the repairs on the last of the 787 Dreamliners that had to be stored long-term until small gaps in the fuselage joints were repaired. Boeing has completed the joint verification work on the last 122 787s that they had accumulated in its inventory, ensuring that each met its specification for the minor carbon composite gaps created during the build process of the mostly composite jetliner. This marks the end of a long, expensive slog to fix 122 Dreamliners that have preoccupied hundreds of mechanics, taking them away from their regular jet production work. The paper-thin gaps that were not determined to be a risk of the structural integrity of the airplane nevertheless still did not meet manufacturing specifications, and more importantly, they kept the aircraft from being delivered to airline customers. The last aircraft, a 787-10 built in 2021, left Boeing's Everett factory, allowing Boeing to spool down a so-called shadow factory used for disassembling, inspecting, and rebuilding the fuselage joints and other parts of each 787, in a process that took more hours to complete per aircraft than to actually build an entire new Dreamliner. And my how time flies, because the financially draining rework requiring meticulous disassembly and then reassembly of each aircraft has spanned over 5 years now. Seems just like yesterday, doesn't it? Meanwhile, other teams of mechanics are still reworking 737 MAXs in storage, of which about 55 remained at the end of January. Boeing has referred to the 787 and MAX rework projects as shadow factories, because they take away workers from the main assembly plants. Chief Financial Officer Brian West said last month he expected to close out both so-called shadow offices this year, immediately improving Boeing's profit margins. Writing on her LinkedIn page, Pope said that the mechanics who completed the 787 work will now move on to new assignments, with many of them helping us, she said, advance the 777X program. This is what we mean when we said we would shut down the shadow factories and turn our full attention to building all new airplanes, Pope added. Although the completion of the fuselage gap rework is a positive milestone, still other slowdowns in the jet production system remain. A separate inventory of unfinished 787s newly built in Charleston, South Carolina has been piling up due to part shortages. The main holdups are new, still uncertified business class seats and a part called the heat exchanger in the jet's environmental control system, which supplies were interrupted by the Ukraine war. At an industrial conference in February, Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg cited good progress on getting an alternative supply of heat exchangers, but says seats continue to be a problem. And the Everett mechanics freed up by the end of the 787 rework may soon have to help rework the inventory of about 30 previously built 777Xs that are also lining up on runways at Payne Field, the first of them parked there for the past 6 years. Those were built in advance of the 777X completing its flight test, which extended much longer than expected due to yet even more defects for another Boeing product, and still continue till this day. Only when the giant new plane is certified can all those jets be taken out of mothballs, relubricated, and updated with system changes. But hey, at least the main 787 issue is now in Boeing's rearview mirror. After the initial discovery of the 787 fuselage gap problem in the summer of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic shutdown, deliveries of the 787 were halted starting that fall, then resumed briefly the following spring, and then halted again in May of 2021 until August of 2022. Between November 2020 and August of 2022, just 14 Dreamliners were delivered. In 2023, Boeing estimated that the 787 debacle racked up about $6.3 billion in abnormal costs. But by the end of last year, just 25 Dreamliners requiring the fuselage gap rework remained. However, even with the fuselage gaps fixed, deliveries of these repaired aircraft will be slow. In many cases, they will now be taken by different airlines than originally intended, and so they need to be repainted or have new interiors installed, which again could result in part shortages. Pope again wrote on her LinkedIn page that Boeing will work with airlines to deliver the remaining reworked airplanes over the course of this next year. Okay, so that was the good Boeing news. Now the bad. The Air Force will inspect its entire fleet of 89 KC-46 Pegasus aerial refueling tankers, which is based on the Boeing 767 commercial model, after cracks were found on 2 of the 4 new planes set to be delivered to the military. According to the Air Force, the issue was discovered by Boeing, which makes the jets. In response to the website The War Zone, the Air Force said that Boeing is taking measures to temporarily halt deliveries until they fully understand the root cause and implement an effective corrective action plan. The Air Force added that after the inspection, if any cracks are found, the aircraft will undergo repairs before flying again. The cracks were not found on any flight surfaces or hinges, but rather on the primary or secondary structures. As for Boeing, they told the War Zone that they are working closely with the customer to access a potential issue on KC-46A aircraft to mitigate any potential impact to the fleet in pre-production airplanes. The Pegasus program has been beset by problems even before they were delivered. It was years behind schedule before the Flying Branch received its first KC-46A in January 2019. And as the War Zone previously reported, efforts to fix the plane are still ongoing. There are long-standing and serious problems with not only the KC-46's boom, but also the remote vision system that the boom operators use to guide it into the receiving aircraft. These are just 2 of the many issues that have impacted the program. Boeing is currently under contract to address issues with stiffness in the boom on the KC-46, a fix that involves hardware and software changes. As for the remote vision system, or RVS, the contractor is integrating an entirely new version of this into the tanker. The decision was taken after multiple problems with the original RVS, which was found to be potentially dangerous to use as well as potentially risking making the boom operators physically ill. The program continues to suffer from prolonged maintenance repair times due to supply issues with parts needed for repair. In March 2024, the KC-46 program experienced a 2-month delay in delivering new aircraft due to the discovery of a broken part associated with the boom. Inspections of aircraft off the production line found a broken gimbal nut wire, a part important for the directional movement of the refueling boom. All of these problems have cost Boeing a lot of money. In January, the company revealed fourth-quarter charges including an $800 million loss on Pegasus, reflecting what the company said were higher than estimated manufacturing costs. The website Breaking Defense reported at the time, Boeing attributed part of that loss to the September strike of the Seattle Area Machinists Union, which resulted in a 7-week production halt of jetliners such as the twin-aisle 767, from which the KC-46 is derived. Breaking Defense added that the company has lost billions on the KC-46 fixed-price contract since its execution. This is yet another blow to the program created to replace the aging fleet of KC-135 tankers, which first flew during the Eisenhower administration in the late 1950s. In addition, the last of the KC-10 extended refuelers was retired last September. So, there you have it. A little news for the Boeing glass half empty crowd, and a little news for the Boeing half full crowd. So let me know which one are you. Well, I won't know until you let me know down below. So that'll wrap up this good news, bad news episode of Boeing's latest adventures. But as always, be sure and let me know what you think down below. Do all that YouTubey stuff. Until next time, as always, this is Maximus.